Hi guys, so I'm here today to talk to you about Greek and Roman or classical mythology and books from the time period that you can read to familiarise yourself with ancient Greek and Roman mythology. So I recently wrote a blog post about this, which I'll link down below, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about it here, but it is the idea that there is a sort of Greek or Roman ancient mythology canon, something like the kind of established religious texts of Christianity or Judaism, which have a text like the Bible that kind of tells you about that religion, teaches you about the history of the religion and the different stories and messages of that religion. Although these texts are open to interpretation and people don't always agree on how they read, there is this text, this thing exists, and it's a consistent element of that religion. Well, Greek and Roman mythology is part of Greek and Roman religious beliefs. These are the stories of their gods. Depending on, say, which city-state you live in ancient Greece, you're probably going to pay homage to specific gods, and specific gods are going to play specific roles in your lives of varying importance. Because of this, there wasn't a set text that told the stories of the gods in antiquity that everyone would have owned or been familiar with, and even then there wasn't any set versions of a lot of the myths. So there's as big a difference as some versions of ancient mythology giving Eros the position of being one of the earliest gods who, without none of the other gods could have existed, to later versions of the Eros myth where he is the son of Aphrodite, 4th generation Greek god, a lot later obviously, and characterised quite differently. All in all, what I'm trying to get at is there's no set version of a lot of the myths, there's different versions. There was different versions written and told and spread at the time that these gods were even worshipped. They were constantly changing and evolving, and not only that, but there's no one place you can go to read about all the different myths, even if it is only one version. Unfortunately, that just is not a thing. I wish it was, but it isn't. The way most people study ancient mythology is that they get the different versions of the myths from different sources. They might be versions of those myths performed on the stage, they might be references to those myths in completely different stories, and it's about piecing these things together. That is not, however, to put you off delving into Greek mythology, because there are some books in particular which contain a large and varied selection of ancient mythology under the one writer and the one text. So there are ancient books you can go to if you want to read original versions of some of the Greek and Roman myths. And those are the books I want to recommend to you today. So I will waste no more time and jump into looking at the 6 books I have to show you here. So the first text I want to share with you is Hesiod's Theogony. This is a bind-up of Hesiod's 2 epic poems, which were the Theogony and Works and Days. I think most editions do bind these 2 works up together, but I specifically want to talk about the Theogony. This is published by Oxford World Classics, and in fact all of the books I'm going to show you today are published by Oxford World Classics. Those are the editions I own. The Theogony is quite short, as you can see, especially since this is a bind up of 2 works, and it also starts very much at the beginning. It starts with the birth of the gods. So it tells the story of the first gods, who are Gaia and Uranus, Mother Earth and the sky, who then give birth to the Titans, who go on to give birth to the Olympians, who become the worshipped deities in ancient Greece and Rome, like Zeus and Hera and Ares, etc. And the Theogony is essentially just a poem giving the chronology of the birth of the different gods and how they overthrew one another and how Zeus became king of the gods. So a perfect book if you're looking for a good example of one of the possible chronologies of the ancient Greek gods. If you're looking to learn about the myths of famous mythological characters and heroes and demigods like Jason and Medea, one that you might want to check out is Pindars Odds. This is a Greek text from the 5th century BC, and there's 4 different collections of odes in here, but a good chunk of Pindars Odds do deal with the mythological stories of some of the most famous mythological characters that you might know the names of but don't really know the stories of. And rather than wanting to read, say, just the Odyssey to learn about Odysseus or just the Argonautica to learn about Jason, you'd like a slightly wider selection and to dip your toes into quite a few different myths at once, then this is an excellent one to check out. If you're wanting something a little bit fuller with even more myths, however, another one to check out is Apollodorus's The Library of Greek Mythology. This is a later text. It's still a Greek text, but it was compiled during the Roman Empire, and it is, as the title implies, just a massive selection of different Greek myths. And the nice thing about this is that Apollodorus kind of shows how they all intersect. So say there's an entire section on Heracles and you can learn about all the different myths involving Heracles. There's an entire section on Theban myths, a section on Cretan myths, so myths like King Minos and the Minotaur, and they're very, very short. They're almost like tiny short stories or flash fiction in how short they are. Some of them go on for a few pages, others take up half a page, and they're just little snippets, little stories that fit in amongst other stories, or perhaps a linking story between another two larger stories. So excellent one to check out if you want a large variety of Greek mythology. And the last for originally Greek texts I have is Eratosthenes' Constellation myths. And this is from the 3rd century BC, so backtracking a little bit in time. This book looks at astronomy and the constellations in the sky and how the stories surrounding these constellations relate back to Greek myths and gods and heroes. So we learn about how all the different people and creatures that are now seen in the sky through the stars came to be there through the ancient Greek myths. Moving on, I then have 2 Latin texts. These are actually both by the same author, and that is, yes, you guessed it, Ovid. Firstly is Ovid's Metamorphosis, which is the much larger of the 2 works I have here. This is an epic poem like Homer's Iliad or Odyssey, but instead of telling one story like the Iliad and the Odyssey do, or the Aeneid do by Virgil, this one takes together myths involving metamorphosis and strings them all together. Myths dealing with metamorphosis are myths that deal with heroes and gods and mortals who are transformed into different objects or animals. So you might have heard the myth of Daphne being pursued by Apollo, who wanted to take her virginity, and her wanting to remain chaste. She prays to Athena, who turns her into a tree to save her from Apollo. So that's an example of a sort of myth involving metamorphosis, and there's plenty more like that in here. And lastly for this video, but certainly not the only other book that contains Greek mythology, but just another good one to try if you want a variety of myths under one title, and that is Ovids Fasting. This book is a day-by-day countdown of all the different religious festivals that went on in Rome during Ovid's lifetime. So the whole religious calendar for that year and why these different festivals are celebrated, the origin stories of the gods and heroes that they honour, and an interesting look into Roman religion, and also a lot on the topic of the origins of Rome myths like Aeneas and Romulus and Remus. But those are all the books I wanted to show you in this video. Hopefully you've got an idea of where you want to start learning about Greek and Roman mythology from those whose lives it was actually a part of. And if you're already into your Greek and Roman mythology and history, like I know some of you are, then maybe you have a new recommendation from this video. But until next time guys, happy reading, and I'll see you all again soon. Bye!